As the sun peeked through the curtains of our cozy suburban home in Springfield, Illinois, I found myself wide awake, buzzing with excitement. It was barely 6 a.m. on a Saturday, but sleep was the last thing on my mind. I tiptoed out of bed, careful not to wake my husband, Mark, who was still snoring softly beside me. The house was quiet, a rare moment of peace before the usual chaos of our busy lives took over. I made my way to the kitchen, my bare feet padding softly against the cool tile floor. The coffee maker gurgled to life as I pressed the button, filling the air with the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee. While I waited, I couldn't help but check my phone again, scrolling through the email I had received late last night. There it was, still sitting in my inbox like a shining beacon of hope and adventure, confirmation of my graduation trip to Hawaii. My heart raced as I read through the details once more. A week-long stay at a beautiful resort on Maui, complete with a luau, a sunset cruise, and a day trip to the famous road to Hana. It was more than I could have ever dreamed of, a perfect reward for the years of hard work and determination it took to finally earn my degree. As I sipped my coffee, memories of late-night study sessions, countless assignments, and the constant juggling act between work, family, and school flooded my mind. There were times when I thought I'd never make it, moments when I was ready to throw in the towel and give up on my dreams. But I persevered, and now, here I was, a college graduate with a bright future ahead of me. The trip to Hawaii wasn't just a vacation, it was a symbol of everything I had accomplished. I could already picture myself lounging on the pristine beaches of Kaanapali, the warm sand between my toes and the sound of gentle waves lulling me into a state of pure relaxation. I imagined hiking through lush rainforests, standing in or before cascading waterfalls, and watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. As I daydreamed about my upcoming adventure, I heard the familiar creak of the stairs. Mark appeared in the kitchen doorway, his hair tousled from sleep and a confused look on his face. "You're up early," he mumbled, rubbing his eyes. "Everything okay?" I couldn't contain my excitement any longer. "Mark, you won't believe it. Remember that graduation trip I applied for? The one to Hawaii?" I watched as understanding slowly dawned on his face. "I got it. We're going to Hawaii." Mark's eyes widened, and a grin spread across his face. He crossed the kitchen in 2 long strides and swept me up in a bear hug, lifting me off my feet. "That's amazing, honey. I'm so proud of you." As he set me down, I launched into a detailed description of all the activities included in the trip package. Mark listened intently, his smile growing wider with each new detail. It warmed my heart to see him so genuinely happy for me. He had been my rock throughout my entire college journey, picking up the slack at home when I had papers due and offering words of encouragement when I felt overwhelmed. "You deserve this," Mark said, giving my hand a squeeze. "After everything you've been through, all the hard work you've put in, you absolutely deserve to celebrate." Just as we were discussing potential dates for the trip, we heard the front door open. Mark's mother, Linda, let herself in, as she did every Saturday morning. She had been a constant presence in our lives since Mark and I got married 5 years ago, often dropping by unannounced to help with the kids or offer unsolicited advice on how we should be running our household. "Good morning, you two," Linda called out cheerfully as she made her way to the kitchen. "My, you're both up early. Is everything all right?" I exchanged a quick glance with Mark before turning to greet Linda. Despite her sometimes overbearing nature, I genuinely cared for her and appreciated how much she helped us with the children. "Everything's great, Linda," I replied, unable to keep the excitement from my voice. "Actually, we have some fantastic news to share." Linda raised an eyebrow, her curiosity piqued. "Oh, do tell." I took a deep breath, my smile widening. "I've been awarded a graduation trip to Hawaii. A whole week in Maui, all expenses paid. Can you believe it?" For a moment, Linda's face remained blank, as if she was processing the information. Then, slowly, her expression changed. The corners of her mouth turned down, and her brow furrowed. "Hawaii," she repeated, her tone flat. "For a whole week." My excitement faltered slightly at her reaction. This wasn't quite the response I had been hoping for. "Yes, it's an incredible opportunity. I'll get to experience the culture, See the beautiful landscapes dash, and who exactly is going to look after the children while you're off gallivanting on some island? Linda interrupted, her voice sharp. I felt my cheeks flush with a mix of embarrassment and frustration. Well, we haven't worked out all the details yet, but details? Linda scoffed. The details are that you have responsibilities here, young lady. My daughter needs help with her kids, and you're thinking about jetting off to Hawaii? Mark stepped in, placing a hand on my shoulder. Mom, this is a big deal for her. She's worked incredibly hard for this. We'll figure out the childcare situation. But Linda wasn't ready to back down. Figure it out. Mark, your sister is overwhelmed. She needs help, and it's our family's duty to be there for her. Your wife can't just abandon her responsibilities on a whim. I felt a surge of anger rising in my chest. It's not a whim, Linda, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I've spent years working towards my degree, balancing school with family and work. Don't I deserve to celebrate my achievement? Linda's eyes narrowed. Celebrate? You want to celebrate while your family struggles? That's not how we do things in this family. We support each other, we sacrifice for each other. If you had any sense of family values, you'd know that. Her words stung, each one feeling like a personal attack on my character. I had always prided myself on being a dedicated wife and mother, on being there for our extended family whenever they needed me. But didn't I also deserve to have dreams of my own? Mark, sensing the rising tension, tried to mediate. Mom, please. This is supposed to be a happy moment. Can't we discuss this calmly? But Linda was on a roll. Calmly? There's nothing to discuss. She's not going, end of story. Your sister needs us, and that's that. I felt tears pricking at the corners of my eyes, a mixture of frustration and disappointment threatening to spill over. Linda, I understand your concerns, but this trip means a lot to me. I've never asked for much, always putting everyone else's needs before my own. Can't you see how important this is? Linda's expression softened slightly, but her resolve remained firm. I see a young woman who's being selfish, who's forgetting her place in this family. Your place is here, helping with the children, being there for your family. Hawaii will still be there in a few years. I wanted to argue further, to make her understand that this wasn't just about a vacation. It was about recognizing my hard work, about allowing myself a moment to bask in my accomplishments. But the words caught in my throat, choked by the lump of emotion that had formed there. Mark, caught between his loyalty to his mother and his love for me, looked torn. I could see the conflict playing out on his face, his desire to support me warring with his ingrained respect for his mother's opinions. As the tension in the room reached a fever pitch, I realized that this moment was about more than just a trip to Hawaii. It was about my independence, my right to pursue my dreams, and my place within this family dynamic. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I knew would be an ongoing battle. Linda, I said, my voice quiet but firm, I hear your concerns, and I respect your opinion. But this is my decision to make. I've earned this trip, and I intend to go. The silence that followed was deafening. Linda's face turned a shade of red I had never seen before, and for a moment, I thought she might explode. Instead, she turned on her heel and stormed out of the kitchen, leaving Mark and me standing in stunned silence. As the front door slammed shut behind her, I let out a shaky breath. Mark pulled me into a hug, and I finally allowed the tears to fall. What should have been one of the happiest moments of my life had turned into a family crisis, and I couldn't help but wonder if this was just the beginning of a much larger conflict. Little did I know, as I stood there in Mark's arms, that Linda's reaction was only the tip of the iceberg. The days to come would test the strength of our family bonds in ways I could never have imagined, and my dream trip to Hawaii would become the catalyst for a series of events that would change our lives forever. The following day, I awoke with a heavy heart, the excitement of my Hawaii trip now overshadowed by the confrontation with Linda. The house was quiet, eerily so, as if the very walls were holding their breath, waiting for the next outburst. I lay in bed for a few extra minutes, listening to the rhythmic breathing of Mark beside me, wondering how our family had become so fractured overnight. As I finally dragged myself out of bed, The aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafted up from the kitchen. Mark, always the early riser, had already started our Sunday morning ritual. I pulled on my favorite oversized sweater, a comfort item I often turn to in times of stress, and made my way downstairs. Mark was at the stove, flipping pancakes with mechanical precision, his back to me as I entered the kitchen. "Morning," I mumbled, my voice still rough with sleep. He turned, offering a small smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Hey, sleep okay?" I shrugged, pouring myself a cup of coffee. "Not really." Kept replaying yesterday in my head. Mark nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Yeah, me too. Mom was pretty intense." We fell into an uneasy silence, the only sounds the sizzle of batter hitting the hot pan and the occasional sip of coffee. It was a stark contrast to our usual Sunday mornings, filled with laughter and plans for the day ahead. As we sat down to eat, I couldn't help but notice the empty chair where Linda usually sat for our weekly family breakfasts. Her absence was palpable, a glaring reminder of the rift that had formed. "Do you think she'll come by today?" I asked, pushing a piece of pancake around my plate. Mark sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know. I tried calling her last night, but she didn't pick up. I left a voicemail, but..." He trailed off, shrugging helplessly. I reached across the table, squeezing his hand. "I'm sorry, Mark. I never meant to cause problems between you and your mom." "Hey," he said firmly, meeting my eyes. "You have nothing to apologize for. You earned that trip, and you deserve to go. Mom, she'll come around. She has to." But even as he said the words, I could see the doubt in his eyes. Linda had always been a force of nature, unyielding in her beliefs and expectations. I couldn't help but wonder if this was the beginning of the end of our once close family dynamic. As the day wore on, the tension in the house seemed to grow. Mark busied himself with yard work, while I tried to focus on some laundry and meal prep for the week ahead. But my mind kept wandering to my suitcase, still packed and ready in our bedroom closet, a symbol of my dreams and the freedom I longed for. It was mid-afternoon when we heard the familiar sound of Linda's car pulling into our driveway. Mark and I exchanged glances, a mix of relief and apprehension passing between us. Maybe she was here to apologize, to find a way to mend the rift that had formed. But as Linda burst through the front door, her face flushed and eyes blazing, I knew we were in for another confrontation. "Well," she announced, her voice dripping with sarcasm, "I hope you're happy. Your sister-in-law is in tears, wondering how she's going to manage without your help while you're off on your little vacation." I felt my stomach drop. "Linda, save it," she snapped, holding up a hand. "I don't want to hear your excuses. I thought I raised my son to marry someone who understood the importance of family, but clearly, I was mistaken." Mark stepped forward, his jaw clenched. "Mom, that's enough. We can figure this out without attacking each other." Linda turned her glare on him. "Oh, and how do you propose we do that, Mark? Your wife has made it clear that her own desires are more important than her family obligations." I could feel the anger bubbling up inside me, threatening to spill over. "That's not fair, Linda. I have always been there for this family. Always. But I'm allowed to have dreams of my own, too." "Dreams?" Linda scoffed. "Dreams don't put food on the table or take care of children. Dreams don't hold a family together. And neither does suffocating someone's aspirations," I shot back, surprising myself with my boldness. "I've worked hard for this, Linda. Years of late nights, sacrificing time with my own children to study. Don't I deserve to celebrate that achievement?" For a moment, something flickered in Linda's eyes, a hint of understanding, perhaps. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a steely resolve. "What you deserve," she said coldly, "is to remember your place in this family. And if you can't do that on your own, then I'll have to remind you." Before I could process what was happening, Linda had stormed past us and up the stairs. We heard the sound of doors opening and closing, drawers being yanked open. "Mom!" Mark called, confusion and concern in his voice. "What are you doing?" When Linda reappeared at the top of the stairs, my blood ran cold. In her hands, she clutched my passport, the little blue book that held the key to my Hawaiian dreams. "Linda, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. What are you doing with that? She descended the stairs slowly, her eyes never leaving mine. Ensuring that you remember where your priorities should lie. Time seemed to slow as I watched Linda move towards our fireplace. With a swift motion, she tossed my passport into the flames, which eagerly licked at the edges of the document. No, I cried, lunging forward. But it was too late. The fire consumed my passport, reducing my dreams to ashes in a matter of seconds. The room fell silent, save for the crackling of the fire. I stared at the flames, watching as the last remnants of my passport curled and blackened. Shock, disbelief, and a deep, searing anger warred within me. Mark was the first to break the silence. "Mom," he said, his voice low and dangerous, "what have you done?" Linda stood tall, chin raised defiantly. What needed to be done? Sometimes, we have to make hard choices for the good of the family. I turned to her, tears of frustration and rage blurring my vision. The good of the family? How is destroying my property and my dreams good for anyone? You'll thank me one day, Linda said, though I detected a hint of uncertainty in her voice. When you realize that family is more important than any trip. This isn't about the trip. I exploded, years of pent-up frustration finally boiling over. This is about you thinking you can control every aspect of our lives. You can't stand the idea of anyone making decisions that don't align with your vision of how things should be. Mark put a hand on my shoulder, whether to comfort me or hold me back, I wasn't sure. "Mom," he said, his voice strained, "I think you should leave. Now." Linda's eyes widened, shock and hurt flashing across her face. "Mark, surely you can't dash leave," Mark repeated, more firmly this time. We'll talk later. But right now, you need to go." For a moment, Linda looked like she might argue further. But something in Mark's expression must have convinced her. Without another word, she turned and left, the slam of the front door echoing through the house. As soon as she was gone, my knees gave out. I sank to the floor, sobs racking my body. Mark knelt beside me, pulling me into his arms. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, his own voice thick with emotion. "I can't believe she... God, I'm so sorry." I clung to him, my anchor in the storm of emotions threatening to overwhelm me. Anger, grief, and a profound sense of violation swirled within me. My passport, my ticket to freedom and celebration, was gone. But more than that, the trust and respect I had for Linda, despite our differences, had been irreparably damaged. As my sobs subsided, replaced by a hollow emptiness, I pulled back to look at Mark. "What do we do now?" I asked, hating how small and defeated my voice sounded. Mark shook his head, looking as lost as I felt. "I don't know. But we'll figure it out together, okay? We'll find a way to make this right." I nodded, wanting to believe him but finding it difficult. The path ahead seemed fraught with challenges, replacing my passport, dealing with the fallout with Linda, navigating the complex family dynamics that had been forever altered by this single, unthinkable act. As we sat there on the floor, the scent of burnt paper still lingering in the air, I couldn't help but wonder if our family would ever be the same again. Linda's actions had crossed a line I never thought she would, shattering the delicate balance we had maintained for years. But amidst the pain and uncertainty, a small spark of determination began to flicker within me. I had fought hard for my education, for my dreams. I wasn't about to let them go up in smoke without a fight. Somehow, someway, I would find a path forward. The journey ahead would be difficult, but as I looked at Mark, seeing the love and support in his eyes, I knew I wouldn't be facing it alone. The road to healing and reconciliation would be long and fraught with challenges. But in that moment, as Mark and I held each other amidst the wreckage of Linda's actions, I made a silent vow. I would not let this setback define me. I would find a way to reclaim my dreams, to assert my independence, and to show Linda, and perhaps myself, that I was stronger than she gave me credit for. The fire in the hearth slowly died down, the last embers of my passport fading away. But within me, a new fire was kindling, one of resilience, determination, and the unshakable belief that I deserved to chase my dreams, no matter the obstacles in my path. The days following Linda's explosive actions were a blur of emotion and tension. Our once peaceful home felt like a pressure cooker, ready to burst at any moment. Mark and I moved around each other carefully, as if walking on eggshells, both of us struggling to process what had happened and unsure of how to move forward. The morning after the incident, I woke up with a sense of hollow disbelief. For a fleeting moment, I hoped it had all been a bad dream. But the acrid smell of burnt paper still lingering in the air quickly dispelled that notion. I dragged myself out of bed, feeling as if I'd aged a decade overnight. Mark was already in the kitchen when I came downstairs, his hands wrapped around a mug of coffee, staring blankly at the wall. He looked up as I entered, his eyes filled with a mixture of concern and guilt. "Hey," he said softly. "How are you holding up?" I shrugged, not trusting my voice just yet. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat across from him at the table. The silence between us was heavy, laden with unspoken thoughts and emotions. Finally, Mark broke the silence. "I called the passport office," he said. "They said we can apply for an emergency replacement, but it'll take some time and we'll need to provide evidence of the incident." I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. The thought of having to explain to a government official that my mother-in-law had burned my passport in a fit of rage was almost too much to bear. "What about your mom?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Mark's jaw tightened. "I haven't heard from her. I left a few messages, but..." He trailed off, shaking his head. The strain was evident on his face, and I felt a pang of guilt. Mark was caught in an impossible position, torn between his love for me and his loyalty to his mother. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "We'll figure this out," I said, trying to inject some confidence into my voice. "Together." He gave me a small smile, but I could see the worry still lingering in his eyes. As the days passed, the reality of our situation began to sink in. I had to call the travel agency and explain that I might not be able to make the trip. The sympathetic voice on the other end of the line told me they'd do their best to hold my reservation, but they couldn't make any guarantees. Each word felt like another dream slipping away. Mark threw himself into the process of getting my passport replaced, making calls and gathering the necessary documentation. I was grateful for his support, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this whole ordeal was putting an enormous strain on our relationship. The silence from Linda was deafening. Days turned into a week, and still, we heard nothing from her. Part of me was relieved. I wasn't sure I was ready to face her yet. But I could see the toll it was taking on Mark. He'd pick up his phone dozens of times a day, thumb hovering over her number, before putting it down again with a sigh. One evening, about a week after the incident, we were sitting on the couch, the TV on but neither of us really watching it. Mark turned to me, his expression serious. "I think we need to talk about what happened," he said. "Really talk about it." I felt my stomach clench, but I knew he was right. We'd been tiptoeing around the issue, dealing with the practical fallout but not addressing the emotional impact. "Okay," I said, taking a deep breath. "Let's talk." Mark ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I'd come to recognize as a sign of his frustration. "I'm so angry with her," he admitted. "What she did, it's unforgivable. But she's still my mom, you know? I can't just cut her out of our lives." I nodded, understanding his dilemma. "I don't want you to have to choose between us, Mark. That's not fair to you." "But it's not fair to you either," he countered. "What she did, it wasn't just about the passport. It was a complete disregard for your feelings, your dreams. I can't just let that slide." We talked for hours, really talked, in a way we hadn't since before the incident. We shared our fears, our frustrations, and our hopes for moving forward. It wasn't an easy conversation, there were tears and raised voices at times, but by the end, I felt like we'd taken a small step towards healing. The next day, as I was folding laundry, my phone buzzed with a text from Sarah, Mark's sister. My heart sank as I read her message. "Hey, can we talk? Mom told me what happened." I showed the text to Mark, who looked as apprehensive as I felt. "You don't have to talk to her if you're not ready," he said. But I knew avoiding the issue wouldn't make it go away. "No, it's okay. I should hear what she has to say." I called Sarah, my hand shaking slightly as I held the phone to my ear. Her voice was hesitant when she answered. "Hey, how are you holding up?" "I've been better," I admitted. Your mom told you what happened? Sarah sighed. Yeah, she did. Look, I'm so sorry. What she did, it's not okay. I want you to know that I don't agree with her actions at all. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I'd been worried that Linda might have turned the whole family against me. Thank you, Sarah. That means a lot. We talked for a while, Sarah reassuring me that she understood my desire to take the trip and celebrate my achievement. Mom can be intense when it comes to family stuff, she said. But burning your passport? That's way over the line. As we were wrapping up the call, Sarah hesitated. Have you thought about what you're going to do? About Mom, I mean. I sighed. Honestly, I don't know. Part of me is so angry I never want to see her again. But I know that's not realistic, or fair to Mark. I don't know how to move past this. Give it time, Sarah advised. And remember, you have support. Not just from Mark, but from me too. We'll figure this out as a family. After hanging up, I felt a small weight lift from my shoulders. Knowing that not everyone in Mark's family sided with Linda gave me hope that maybe, just maybe, we could find a way through this mess. That evening, as Mark and I were cleaning up after dinner, his phone rang. He looked at the screen, his face paling slightly. It's Mom, he said. I nodded, my heart racing. You should answer it. Mark took a deep breath and accepted the call. Hello. He listened for a moment, his expression unreadable. Yeah, okay. Hold on. He covered the phone with his hand and looked at me. She wants to talk to both of us. On speaker. For a moment, I was tempted to refuse. The thought of hearing Linda's voice made my stomach churn. But I knew we couldn't avoid this conversation forever. Okay, I said, steeling myself. Mark put the phone on speaker and set it on the kitchen counter. Go ahead, Mom. You're on speaker with both of us. Linda's voice crackled through the speaker, sounding smaller and more uncertain than I'd ever heard her. I owe you both an apology, she began. I exchanged a surprised glance with Mark. This was not what I had expected. What I did was wrong, Linda continued. I let my fears and my need for control get the better of me. I had no right to destroy your property or try to dictate your life choices. I felt tears pricking at the corners of my eyes, a mix of relief and lingering anger swirling inside me. I understand if you can't forgive me right away, Linda said. But I hope that, in time, we can find a way to repair our relationship. I love you both, and I'm truly sorry for the pain I've caused. The silence that followed was heavy with emotion. Mark looked at me, his eyes questioning. I took a deep breath, trying to sort through the tumult of feelings Linda's words had stirred up. Thank you for apologizing, Linda, I finally said, my voice shaky but firm. I appreciate you recognizing that what you did was wrong. But you're right, forgiveness isn't going to happen overnight. We have a lot to work through. I understand, Linda replied, her voice thick with emotion. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make this right. Even if that means helping you get a new passport and supporting your trip to Hawaii. I felt a glimmer of hope at her words. It wasn't a magical fix, the hurt and betrayal were still raw, but it was a start. A foundation we could potentially build upon. As we ended the call, promising to meet in person soon to talk more, I felt a mix of exhaustion and cautious optimism. The road ahead would be challenging, full of difficult conversations and emotional hurdles. But for the first time since Linda had thrown my passport into the fire, I felt like there might be a way forward. Mark pulled me into a hug, and I melted into his embrace. We're going to be okay, he murmured into my hair. It'll take time, but we'll get through this. I nodded against his chest, allowing myself to believe, just for a moment, that everything might work out. The fallout from Linda's actions had shaken our family to its core, but it had also revealed strengths I didn't know we had, in ourselves, in our relationship, and even in the family bonds I thought had been irreparably damaged. As we stood there in our kitchen, holding each other, I made a silent promise to myself. No matter what happened, I wouldn't let this experience define me or limit my dreams. Somehow, someway, I would make it to Hawaii. And when I did, it would be a celebration not just of my academic achievements, but of the resilience and strength I'd discovered through this ordeal. The journey ahead would be difficult, but I was ready to face it head-on. With Mark by my side and a newfound understanding of my own strength, I felt prepared to navigate whatever challenges lay ahead, and to reclaim the dreams that had been momentarily lost in the ashes of Linda's actions. The weeks following Linda's apology were a delicate dance of tentative peace and lingering tension. While her words had opened the door to reconciliation, the path forward was far from smooth. Mark and I found ourselves navigating a new reality, one where trust had to be rebuilt from the ground up. One sunny Saturday morning, as I sat at our kitchen table sipping coffee and scrolling through my phone, an idea struck me. I quickly dialed my friend Jessica, who worked at the local passport office. "Hey Jess," I said when she answered, trying to keep the desperation out of my voice. "I need a huge favor." I explained the situation to her, my voice catching as I recounted Linda's actions. Jessica listened patiently, and I could hear the shock in her voice when I finished. "Wow," she said. "I'm so sorry you're going through this. Look, I can't make any promises, but let me see what I can do to expedite your application. Come by the office first thing Monday morning, okay?" A wave of relief washed over me. "Thank you, Jess. You have no idea how much this means to me." As I hung up, I felt a small spark of hope ignite within me. For the first time since the incident, I allowed myself to believe that my trip to Hawaii might still be possible. I shared the news with Mark over lunch, and his face lit up with a mixture of relief and excitement. "That's great, honey," he said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "See, things are going to work out." His optimism was infectious, and I found myself smiling genuinely for the first time in weeks. But as quickly as the joy came, it was tempered by a nagging thought. "What about your mom?" I asked hesitantly. "Should we tell her?" Mark's expression grew serious. "I think we should. If we're going to move past this, we need to be open and honest. Even if it's difficult." I nodded, knowing he was right but dreading the conversation nonetheless. We decided to invite Linda over for dinner the following evening, hoping that a neutral setting might help ease the tension. The next day, as I prepared dinner, my nerves were on edge. The sound of the doorbell made me jump, nearly dropping the casserole dish I was holding. Mark answered the door, and I heard the muffled sounds of greeting from the hallway. Linda entered the kitchen, her usual confident demeanor replaced by an almost sheepish air. She held a bouquet of flowers, which she thrust towards me awkwardly. "These are for you," she said. I hope you like lilies." I accepted the flowers, touched by the gesture despite my lingering anger. "Thank you, Linda. They're beautiful." The atmosphere during dinner was tense, with conversation limited to safe topics like the weather and Mark's work. As we cleared the plates, I exchanged a glance with Mark, silently asking if it was time. He nodded encouragingly. "Linda," I began, my heart racing. "There's something we need to tell you." She looked up, her expression a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. I took a deep breath and continued. "I've been in touch with a friend at the passport office. She's going to help expedite my application. If all goes well, I should have my new passport in time for the Hawaii trip." I watched Linda carefully, bracing myself for her reaction. To my surprise, her face softened, and I saw a glimmer of what looked like genuine happiness in her eyes. "That's wonderful news," she said softly. I'm happy for you." The sincerity in her voice caught me off guard. I had expected resistance, perhaps even another outburst. But the Linda sitting before me seemed different from the woman who had burned my passport just weeks ago. "I meant what I said on the phone," Linda continued. "I want to make things right. If there's anything I can do to help with the process, please let me know." Mark, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "Actually, Mom, there is something you could do. The passport office needs a statement explaining what happened to the original passport. Would you be willing to write one?" Linda's face paled slightly, but she nodded without hesitation. "Of course. It's the least I can do." As the evening wore on, we found ourselves engaged in the most open and honest conversation we'd had as a family in years. Linda shared her fears about feeling disconnected from our lives, her worry that my trip signaled a shift in family dynamics that would leave her behind. In turn, Mark and I expressed our frustrations with her over-involvement and need for control. It wasn't an easy conversation. There were tears, raised voices, and moments of uncomfortable silence. But as we talked, I felt a shift in the air, a loosening of the knot of tension that had been sitting in my chest for weeks. By the time Linda left that night, we had a plan in place. She would write the statement for the passport office and had even offered to contribute to the trip expenses as a way of making amends. More importantly, we had agreed to weekly family dinners, a chance to rebuild our relationship on a foundation of mutual respect and understanding. The next few weeks flew by in a whirlwind of activity. True to her word, Jessica at the passport office worked miracles, pushing my application through the system at record speed. Linda, for her part, threw herself into helping with the preparations, researching Hawaiian attractions and helping me shop for tropical weather clothes. It was during one of these shopping trips that I felt the last of my resentment towards Linda begin to melt away. We were in a small boutique, rifling through racks of sundresses, when Linda pulled out a beautiful blue dress with a hibiscus print. "This would look lovely on you," she said, holding it up. "It reminds me of the dress I wore on my honeymoon in Maui." I looked at her in surprise. "You went to Hawaii for your honeymoon? I didn't know that." Linda's eyes took on a faraway look. "Oh yes, it was magical. The beaches, the sunsets. I've never seen anything like it." She paused, a small smile playing on her lips. "You know, I was terrified of flying back then. I almost backed out of the trip entirely. I couldn't hide my shock." "You? Scared of flying? But you always seemed so fearless." Linda chuckled. "Oh, I was a mess. But your father-in-law, he held my hand the entire flight. Told me the most ridiculous jokes to keep my mind off the fact that we were thousands of feet in the air." Her expression grew soft with nostalgia. "That's when I knew he was the one." As Linda shared more stories from her own Hawaiian adventure, I saw her in a new light. This wasn't just my overbearing mother-in-law, but a woman who had once been young and in love, facing her own fears and chasing her own dreams. That evening, as Mark and I sat on our porch, watching the sunset, I recounted my day with Linda. "It's strange," I mused. "A month ago, I couldn't imagine ever forgiving her. And now?" Mark wrapped an arm around my shoulders. "And now?" I leaned into him, feeling a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in a long time. "And now, I'm actually looking forward to rebuilding our relationship. It's like we've been given a second chance." Mark kissed the top of my head. "I'm proud of you, you know. Of both of you. It takes a lot of strength to move past something like this." As we sat there, enjoying the quiet of the evening, I felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over me. The past month had been one of the most challenging periods of my life, but it had also led to unexpected growth and healing. The day finally arrived when my new passport came in the mail. As I held the small blue booklet in my hands, I was struck by how much it represented. It wasn't just a travel document, it was a symbol of perseverance, of family bonds tested and ultimately strengthened. That night, we had a small celebration dinner with Linda. As we raised our glasses in a toast, I looked around the table at the faces of my family. Mark, my rock, who had stood by me through it all. Linda, who had shown that it's never too late to change and make amends. "To new beginnings," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "And to Hawaii," Linda added with a wink. As laughter filled the room, I felt a sense of excitement building within me. In just a few short weeks, I would be embarking on my dream trip. But I realized that the journey I had been on over the past month, the journey of forgiveness, growth, and family healing, was just as valuable as any tropical adventure. The turning point we had reached wasn't just about a trip to Hawaii. It was about rediscovering the strength of our family bonds, about learning to communicate and understand each other in ways we never had before. As I looked forward to the sandy beaches and breathtaking sunsets of Maui, I knew that the real treasure was right here, in this room, in the love and support of my family. The road ahead would still have its challenges, but I felt ready to face them. With my new passport in hand and my family by my side, I was prepared to embrace whatever adventures, both in Hawaii and in life, lay ahead. As the day of my departure for Hawaii drew nearer, I found myself caught in a whirlwind of emotions. Excitement for the trip bubbled within me, but it was tempered by a lingering unease about the fragile peace we'd established with Linda. Despite the progress we'd made, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were walking on eggshells, carefully avoiding any topic that might reignite the tension. It was a warm Sunday afternoon when Linda called, asking if she could come over. Her voice sounded different, hesitant, almost vulnerable. Curiosity piqued, I agreed, and within an hour, she was at our doorstep. Linda stood in our living room, fidgeting with the strap of her purse, a far cry from her usual confident demeanor. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "About what happened, about our family, about everything." Mark and I exchanged glances, unsure of where this was going. We sat down, the air thick with anticipation. "I owe you both a real apology," Linda continued, her eyes meeting mine. "Not just words over the phone or a bunch of flowers. A genuine, heartfelt apology." She took a deep breath, and I could see the tears forming in her eyes. "What I did was inexcusable. Burning your passport wasn't just about ruining a trip, it was a violation of your trust, your dreams, and your independence. I let my fears and insecurities control my actions, and in doing so, I nearly destroyed our family." Her words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of truth. I felt a lump forming in my throat, my own eyes stinging with unshed tears. "I've always prided myself on being a strong woman, on holding this family together," Linda went on. "But I realize now that my need for control was pushing you away. I was so afraid of losing my place in your lives that I couldn't see the damage I was causing." She turned to Mark, her voice breaking. "And you, my son. I put you in an impossible position, forcing you to choose between your wife and your mother. That wasn't fair, and I'm so sorry." Mark reached out, taking his mother's hand. "Mom, but Linda wasn't finished." She turned back to me, her eyes pleading. "I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness. What I did was unforgivable. But I want you to know that I am truly, deeply sorry. I've been seeing a therapist, trying to work through my issues with control and fear of abandonment. I want to be better for myself, for you, for our family." The room fell silent as Linda's words sank in. I felt a myriad of emotions washing over me: anger, hurt, sympathy, and a glimmer of hope. This was the apology I had been waiting for, the acknowledgement of the pain she had caused. After what felt like an eternity, I found my voice. "Thank you, Linda," I said softly. "I appreciate your honesty and the effort you're making. It means a lot to hear you say these things." Linda nodded, wiping away a tear. "I know words aren't enough. I want to show you, through my actions, that I'm committed to changing. I want to earn back your trust, even if it takes years." Mark squeezed his mother's hand. "We appreciate that, Mom. It's not going to be easy, but we're willing to work on this together." As we talked more, Linda shared some of what she'd been discussing in therapy: her fear of becoming irrelevant in our lives, her struggle to adjust to her changing role as a mother and mother-in-law. It was eye-opening to hear her perspective, to understand the insecurities that had driven her actions. "I've always defined myself by my role as a mother," she admitted. "When I saw you planning this trip, celebrating your achievement, I felt replaced. Like I wasn't needed anymore. It was irrational, I know that now, but at the moment, it felt like my world was crumbling." I felt a pang of empathy. While it didn't excuse her actions, I could understand the fear behind them. "Linda," I said gently, "you'll always have a place in our lives. But it needs to be a healthy one, where we all respect each other's boundaries and dreams." She nodded, a small smile breaking through her tears. "I want that too. More than anything." As the afternoon wore on, our conversation shifted from the past to the future. We talked about setting boundaries, about communication, about finding new ways to be a family. It wasn't easy, there were moments of tension, old hurts that resurfaced, but there was also laughter, and a sense of hope that had been missing for so long. Before she left, Linda surprised us once more. She pulled out an envelope from her purse and handed it to me. Inside was a check, a generous contribution towards my Hawaii trip. "I know it doesn't make up for what I did," she said quickly as I started to protest. But I want you to enjoy this trip to the fullest. You've earned it, and I want to be part of celebrating your achievement, not holding you back." Touched by the gesture, I hugged her, the first real hug we'd shared in months. It felt like a new beginning, a chance to rebuild our relationship on a foundation of mutual respect and understanding. After Linda left, Mark and I sat in contemplative silence. The emotional weight of the afternoon had left us both drained but oddly invigorated. "That couldn't have been easy for her," Mark said finally. "Opening up like that, admitting her faults." I nodded, still processing everything that had been said. It wasn't easy for any of us. But it felt necessary. Like we've finally lanced a wound that's been festering for too long. We spent the rest of the evening talking, really talking, about our feelings, our hopes for the future, and how we wanted to move forward as a family. It was cathartic, bringing to light issues we'd both been avoiding. "You know," I said as we were getting ready for bed, "I think this whole ordeal, as painful as it's been, might end up being a turning point for us. For all of us." Mark pulled me into a hug. "I think you're right. It's forced us to confront things we've been ignoring for too long." As I lay in bed that night, I reflected on the journey we'd been on. From the initial excitement of my graduation trip to the devastation of Linda's actions, to this moment of genuine reconciliation, it had been an emotional rollercoaster. But through it all, we'd emerged stronger, more honest with each other, and more committed to nurturing our family bonds. The next few weeks leading up to my trip were markedly different. There was a new openness in our interactions with Linda. She made efforts to respect our boundaries, asking before dropping by and showing genuine interest in our lives without trying to control every aspect. We had our moments of tension, of course. Old habits die hard, and there were times when Linda's controlling nature would peek through. But now, instead of letting it simmer and build resentment, we addressed it head-on. Sometimes it led to difficult conversations, but each time, we came out the other side with a better understanding of each other. One evening, about a week before my departure, Linda invited us over for dinner. As we sat around her dining table, I was struck by how different the atmosphere was compared to just a few months ago. There was laughter, easy conversation, and a warmth that had been missing for so long. After dinner, as we were helping clean up, Linda pulled me aside. "I have something for you," she said, leading me to the guest room. She opened the closet and pulled out a suitcase, not just any suitcase, but a beautiful, high-quality one that looked perfect for island hopping. "I saw this and thought of you," she said, a hint of nervousness in her voice. "I hope it's not overstepping, but I wanted you to have something special for your trip." I ran my hand over the smooth surface of the suitcase, touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift. "It's beautiful, Linda." "Thank you." She smiled, relief evident in her eyes. "I'm so proud of you, you know. For your graduation, for standing up for yourself, for being willing to work on our relationship even after what I did. I hope you have the most wonderful time in Hawaii. You deserve it." As I hugged her, I felt the last vestiges of resentment melt away. The road to forgiveness had been long and challenging, but in that moment, I knew we'd turned a corner. Linda's apology, backed up by her consistent efforts to change, had opened the door to a new chapter in our family's story. Later that night, as Mark and I drove home, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. "You know," I said, "I think I'm actually looking forward to coming back from Hawaii and sharing the experience with your mom." Mark glanced at me, a smile playing on his lips. "Yeah, that's really great to hear." As we pulled into our driveway, I realized that the true gift wasn't the suitcase or even the trip to Hawaii. It was this, the healing of our family, the strengthening of our bonds, and the promise of a future where we could all support each other's dreams while maintaining our own identities. The journey hadn't been easy, and I knew there would still be challenges ahead. But as I looked forward to my Hawaiian adventure, I felt grateful for the journey we'd already taken, a journey of forgiveness, growth, and renewed family ties. It was a reminder that sometimes, the most meaningful trips aren't to exotic locations, but to the heart of what truly matters: family, understanding, and love. The day of my departure arrived with a mix of excitement and nervous energy. As I stood in our bedroom, zipping up the new suitcase Linda had given me, I couldn't help but marvel at how much had changed in just a few short months. What had started as a simple celebration of my graduation had turned into a transformative journey for our entire family. Mark came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. "Got everything?" I leaned back into his embrace, savoring the moment. "I think so. Though I'm half expecting your mom to show up with something I've forgotten." We both chuckled, the joke a testament to how far we'd come. The Linda of a few months ago would have indeed shown up, probably with a list of things I'd overlooked and a lecture on proper packing. But the new Linda, the one we'd been getting to know, had respected my space and trusted me to prepare for my trip on my own. As if on cue, the doorbell rang. We headed downstairs to find Linda standing on our porch, holding a small gift bag. I know, she said with a self-deprecating smile. "I promised I wouldn't interfere. But I couldn't let you go without a proper send-off." Inside the bag was a journal, its cover embossed with a beautiful Hawaiian scene. "I thought you might like to write about your adventures," Linda explained. "And maybe, if you're comfortable, you could share some of it with us when you get back." I hugged her, touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift and what it represented, Linda's genuine interest in my experiences, without trying to control them. "Thank you," I said warmly. "I'd love to share it with you." The drive to the airport was filled with excited chatter about my itinerary and last-minute advice from both Mark and Linda. As we pulled up to the departures area, I felt a flutter of anxiety. This would be the longest I'd been away from Mark since we got married. "You're going to have an amazing time," Mark said, pulling me into a tight hug. "I can't wait to hear all about it." Linda hugged me next. "Enjoy every moment," she said, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "You've earned this." As I walked into the airport, I turned back for one last wave. The sight of Mark and Linda standing together, smiling and waving back, filled me with a sense of peace. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I knew we'd face them together. The flight to Maui was long but uneventful. As the plane began its descent, I pressed my face to the window, eager for my first glimpse of the islands. The sight took my breath away, lush green mountains rising from a turquoise sea, wispy clouds clinging to the peaks. It was more beautiful than I had ever imagined. My first few days in Hawaii passed in a blur of new experiences. I walked on black sand beaches, hiked to hidden waterfalls, and watched the sunset from the top of Haleakala. Each night, I dutifully wrote in the journal Linda had given me, capturing not just the events of the day but my thoughts and feelings as well. One evening, about halfway through my trip, I found myself sitting on the lanai of my hotel room, watching the sun sink into the ocean. As I sipped a glass of local pineapple wine, I pulled out my phone to call Mark. "Hey, beautiful," his voice came through, warm and familiar despite the distance. "How's paradise?" I laughed, feeling a rush of love and gratitude. "It's incredible, Mark. I wish you could see it." We chatted for a while about my adventures and what was happening back home. Then Mark said, "Oh, Mom's here. She's been helping me with some home improvement projects. Want to say hi?" A few months ago, the idea of Mark and Linda spending time alone together might have filled me with anxiety. Now, it brought a smile to my face. "Sure, put her on." Linda's voice was bright as she asked about my trip. I found myself eagerly sharing stories of my experiences, from learning to surf and failing spectacularly, to tasting exotic fruits at a local farmer's market. "It sounds wonderful," Linda said wistfully. "You know, your father-in-law and I always talked about going back to Hawaii for our 40th anniversary. We never made it." There was a moment of silence, heavy with the weight of missed opportunities. Then, surprising myself, I said, "Well, why don't you come with us next time? We could make it a family trip." The words were out before I could second-guess them, but as soon as I said it, I knew I meant it. I could almost hear Linda's surprise through the phone. "Really?" she asked, her voice small. "You'd want me there?" "Of course," I said, realizing as I spoke that it was true. It would be fun to experience this together. As we said our goodbyes, I felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the tropical climate. The idea of a family trip, which once would have filled me with dread, now seemed like an exciting possibility. The rest of my time in Hawaii was a perfect blend of relaxation and adventure. I swam with sea turtles, learned about Hawaiian culture at a traditional luau, and spent long, lazy days reading on the beach. But as much as I was enjoying my solo journey, I found myself looking forward to sharing these experiences with Mark and, yes, even Linda. On my last night in Maui, I sat on the beach, watching the stars come out over the ocean. I pulled out the journal and began to write, reflecting not just on my trip but on the journey our family had taken over the past few months. I wrote about the pain of Linda's initial betrayal, the long and difficult process of forgiveness, and the unexpected joy of rebuilding our relationship on a foundation of mutual respect and understanding. I wrote about the challenges we'd faced and overcome, and the ones I knew still lay ahead. As I closed the journal, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. This trip had been everything I'd hoped for, a celebration of my achievements, a chance to relax and recharge. But it had also given me the time and space to reflect on the changes in our family dynamic, to appreciate how far we'd come and to look forward to the future we were building together. The flight home was bittersweet. Part of me longed to stay in the paradise I'd grown to love, but another part was eager to get back to Mark and to see how our new family dynamic would continue to evolve. As I walked through the arrival gates, I spotted Mark immediately. His face lit up as our eyes met, and he enveloped me in a crushing hug. "Welcome home," he murmured into my hair. To my surprise, Linda was there too, standing a respectful distance away but smiling warmly. "How was your trip?" she asked as she hugged me. "It was amazing," I said truthfully. "I can't wait to tell you all about it." As we drove home, I regaled them with stories of my adventures. I was in the middle of describing a particularly harrowing attempt at paddleboarding when I noticed we weren't taking our usual route. "Where are we going?" I asked, confusion evident in my voice. Mark and Linda exchanged a conspiratorial glance. "We have a little surprise for you," Mark said, a hint of excitement in his voice. A few minutes later, we pulled up in front of our favorite local restaurant. As we walked in, I was greeted by a chorus of surprise. Our closest friends and family were all there, gathered to welcome me home. As I made my way around the room, hugging friends and accepting congratulations on my graduation, I felt overwhelmed with gratitude. This was what it was all about, not just the personal achievement of earning my degree or the reward of a dream vacation, but the love and support of the people who had been with me every step of the way. Later, as we all sat around the table sharing food and laughter, I found myself seated between Mark and Linda. As I listened to Linda regale my friends with the story of her own long-ago Hawaiian adventure, embellishing it with dramatic gestures and playful exaggerations, I couldn't help but smile. This was a side of Linda I'd rarely seen before, relaxed, funny, and completely at ease with herself and those around her. I caught Mark's eye across the table, and he winked at me, a silent acknowledgement of how far we'd all come. As the evening wound down, I stood to make a toast. Looking around at the faces of my loved ones, I felt a surge of emotion. "I want to thank you all for being here tonight," I began. "This past year has been a journey in more ways than one. I've learned that sometimes the most important trips we take aren't to far-off places, but to a deeper understanding of ourselves and our relationships." I paused, my eyes finding Linda's. "I've learned that it's never too late to start over, to rebuild trust, and to find new ways of loving and supporting each other. And I've learned that family, whether it's the one we're born into or the one we choose, is the greatest adventure of all." As glasses clinked and cheers erupted, I felt Mark's arm slip around my waist. "Welcome home," he whispered again, and I knew he meant more than just my return from Hawaii. Later that night, as Mark and I lay in bed, I thought about the journey we'd been on. From the initial excitement of my graduation, through the pain and betrayal of Linda's actions, to this moment of genuine happiness and reconciliation, it had been a roller coaster of emotions. "What are you thinking about?" Mark asked, his voice soft in the darkness. I turned to face him, smiling. "I'm thinking about how sometimes the worst moments in our lives can lead to the best changes. If Linda hadn't burned my passport, we might never have confronted the issues in our family. We might have just kept going, sweeping things under the rug." Mark nodded, understanding in his eyes. "It's been a tough road, but I think we're stronger for it." As I drifted off to sleep, I felt a sense of excitement for what the future held. Our family wasn't perfect, we still had our moments of tension and disagreement. But we'd learned to communicate, to respect each other's boundaries, and to support each other's dreams. My Hawaiian adventure had been everything I'd hoped for and more. But the real adventure, I realized, was just beginning. It was the adventure of family, of love, of continual growth and understanding. And as I closed my eyes, I looked forward to every step of that journey, wherever it might lead us.